Tonight, we walk slowly among the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires, where pale volcanic stone rises from the quiet mountains, like a forest made of time. Settle in and let the pace become unhurried. The air is dry and cool against your face, and the first thing you notice is the stillness. A high desert stillness, with the faint smell of sun-warmed rock, juniper, oak leaves and dust resting in the bends of the trail. The spires stand ahead of you in the dimming light, not sharp in a harsh way, but patient, weathered, and strangely delicate, as though the mountain once softened itself into ash, then remembered how to stand again. We are in the Chiricahua Mountains of southeastern Arizona, in that quiet place where the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires gather by the thousands. You can feel how the land holds its breath here. The slopes rise and fold around us, and the stone towers lean into the evening with rounded shoulders, pale gray faces, and warm rust-colored seams. Some are narrow as chimneys, some are thick and columned, some seem to balance one stone thought upon another, though they are only doing what stone does best, which is remain. As we begin, you don't need to hurry toward understanding. The strangeness of these spires is not something to solve all at once. It's something to approach gradually, the way dusk approaches a canyon wall, or the way coolness gathers in the hollows after sunset. We can let the story come up through the ground slowly. We can let it move from the smell of dry grass, to the texture of volcanic rock, to the old fire that made this whole quiet wilderness possible. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange because they look almost built, though no hand built them. They rise in avenues and clusters, like silent towers beside invisible streets, and yet every one of them began as drifting ash from a very ancient eruption. Long before the oaks rooted here, long before the pine needles softened the trails, the land opened and released a vast, glowing cloud of volcanic ash and gas. That cloud moved like weather made of heat, spreading across the old landscape, settling into valleys, filling low places, and slowly becoming stone. You can imagine it without force, if you like, not as noise, but as a memory the earth is still keeping. Beneath your feet, the trail rests on a cooled sheet of rhyolitic tuff, made from ash so hot that its grains pressed together and welded as they settled. Rhyolite is a volcanic rock, rich in silica, the same family of chemistry that can make obsidian, pumice, and pale flowing lava. Here, though, the story is mostly ash, and that is part of the wonder. These high, rigid towers began as fragments light enough to drift. The evening light touches the spires softly now. It gathers along ledges and fades inside cracks. When you look closely, the rock is not one plain color. It carries grays, creams, pinks, oranges, and muted lavender shadows, all changing as the sun lowers behind the ridges. The stone feels rough if you place your palm near it, full of tiny broken textures, places where crystals, pumice fragments, and ash once fused into a single body. It is quiet rock, but it isn't simple rock. We move slowly between the first formations, and the trail narrows with a gentle curve. The air smells faintly resinous where juniper and pine hold the day's warmth. A breeze passes through the trees, and it does not whistle so much as breathe. You hear gravel underfoot, a dry, soft sound, and beyond it, the large silence of the Chiricahua high country. The spires seem to listen with us, their long shadows resting across the path. What makes the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires feel so unusual is the way they combine delicacy and mass. They are heavy, certainly, made of stone and gravity, and millions of years, but many stand with a slenderness that seems almost unlikely. Their shapes come from cracks. After the welded ash cooled, it shrank, and the shrinking opened joints through the rock, long fractures that divided the sheet into blocks and columns. Water later entered those joints. Frost, heat, roots and time widened them. This is how a solid volcanic blanket became a maze of pinnacles. The rock did not need to be carved all at once. It only needed weakness in the right places, and patience enough for weather to work. Rain fell into fractures. Summer sun warmed one face and left another cool. Minerals loosened grain by grain. Small pieces fell away, then larger edges rounded, and slowly the rock separated into towers, walls, balanced shapes, and narrow corridors of shade. You can feel that patience as we pass beneath them. The spires don't seem unfinished. They seem to be in the middle of a long, quiet sentence. Some surfaces are fluted, with vertical grooves where water has traced the same path again and again. Some are smooth and pale, as though sanded by wind and light. Others are knobby with harder pieces that resisted erosion. Little raised textures that catch the last amber glow. If you breathe slowly here, the landscape seems to breathe slowly too. The name Chiricahua carries the sense of a particular mountain world, a sky island rising from the surrounding desert. We are not in a flat wasteland, and we are not in a lush forest. We are in a meeting place. Desert plants live near woodland trees. Yucca, agave, oak, juniper, pine, and manzanita find their levels along the slopes. The stone towers stand among them like pale companions, and the whole place feels suspended between climates, between elevations, between the fire that made the rock and the cool evening that now rests on it. As we walk deeper into the spires, the path feels held by stone on both sides, and the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires begin to gather more closely around us. This is where the strangeness becomes intimate, because the formations are no longer distant shapes on a ridge. They are beside you, above you, sometimes almost leaning inward, and the space between them becomes a quiet room without a roof. The light has softened to a muted gold. It comes through oak branches in narrow bands and settles on the dust like a thin veil. You may notice how the air changes near the rock. In the open, it is dry and gently warm, but near shaded walls it cools against your skin. Stone keeps temperature in its own slow way. It gathers heat through the day, releases it after sunset, and holds pockets of coolness where the sun has not reached. Even the silence has layers here. The spires are strange too, because they make the mountain feel both open and enclosed. From one step to the next, you may see a wide slope of forest and sky, then turn into a passage where all you see is rock, shadow, and a strip of blue above. This is not a cave, but it borrows a cave's hush. Sound becomes close. Your footsteps soften. A bird call, if it comes, seems to arrive from far away, folded by the stone corridors before it reaches you. In these corridors, the science becomes something you can almost touch. The welded tuff is harder in some layers and softer in others. It was laid down in ash flows that settled unevenly, with some portions compacted more strongly than others. Where the ash welded tightly, it resisted weathering. Where it remained more porous or fractured, it gave way more easily. So the land did not erode into a smooth slope. It separated into shapes, leaving behind the pieces that could endure. That endurance is never absolute. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are still changing, though they change at a pace that feels like sleep. A small grain loosens, a crack widens, a flake drops into the shade. Rainwater, slightly acidic from the air and soil, slips along mineral surfaces and alters them. Lichens settle like pale green and silver breath on the rock, and their quiet chemistry helps soften the surface over long spans of time. Nothing here is frozen, even when it seems utterly still. You can think of the spires as a conversation between fire and weather. Fire made the material. Cooling made the cracks. Weather opened the cracks. Gravity cleared away what had loosened. Plants arrived afterward, not as decorations, but as part of the continuing work. Roots find small openings. Moss and lichen hold moisture. Fallen needles make thin soil in sheltered pockets. Life rests on stone, and stone slowly makes room for life. As the trail descends and rises gently through the formations, you begin to see how many kinds of strange there are here. Some towers stand alone, tapering upward like pale candles. Others cluster into walls that look from a distance like ruined battlements, though they are much older and much quieter than any ruin could be. Some boulders perch on narrow bases, and they seem improbable until you remember that erosion is not always interested in symmetry. It removes what it can and leaves what it must. The balanced rocks of Chiricahua are not tricks. They are moments in a long process. A harder cap or block may protect the softer stone beneath it, slowing erosion directly below while surrounding material wears away. Over immense time, the sheltered column remains, and the rock above appears to balance with a kind of calm confidence. It is not defying gravity, it is simply waiting within it. That waiting is part of why the landscape feels peaceful instead of tense. You may feel your own body settling as you look at them. The shoulders lower, the breath lengthens. The mind stops asking the stone to be ordinary. There is comfort in a landscape that does not hurry to explain itself. And the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires hold that comfort in their pale, weathered surfaces. They remind us that strangeness can be gentle, it can be quiet, it can stand in the dusk without asking for anything. The plants here seem to understand that. Manzanita branches curve in smooth red lines beside rough grey stone. Emery oak leaves flicker dull green and silver when the breeze turns them. Pines lift their needles into the cooling air, and the scent is faint but steady, dry resin mingled with dust. Somewhere in the brush, a small animal may move softly through fallen leaves, but the sound is low and brief, absorbed almost at once by the stone. And as we pass farther into the heart of the Chiricahua formations, the walls begin to show the old volcanic sheet more clearly, layer by layer, surface by surface. The spires may look separate now, but they remember being joined. Their divisions are the visible map of cooling, cracking, and weathering. When you look at a row of columns, you are seeing how a single mass learned to become many. That is one of the quietest mysteries here. The ancient eruption that made this place came from a volcanic center often associated with the Turkey Creek caldera, a great collapsed volcanic structure in this region. You don't have to picture it violently. For tonight, picture it geologically, as a deep event in the Earth's long breathing. Magma rich in silica rose and erupted, ash spread across the land, and the chamber below partly emptied. The surface adjusted, the volcanic field cooled. Then time, far more patient than fire, began its work. Rhyolite is viscous when molten because of its silica-rich nature. It does not always flow easily like dark basalt. Instead, it can trap gas, fragment, and erupt as ash, pumice, and hot clouds of volcanic material. In Chiricahua, that ash became the foundation of this strange stone forest. The particles were still hot when they settled, and under their own weight they compacted and welded into rock. The result was neither ordinary lava nor ordinary sediment, but something between movement and memory. You can hear the difference, in a way, when your foot shifts over loose fragments on the trail. The gravel makes a dry, brittle sound. Larger blocks along the path hold a duller silence. If you brush your fingers lightly across a weathered face, the texture may feel granular, almost sandy in places, and firmer in others where welding made the material dense. The rock is telling you how unevenly heat moved through it, and how unevenly time has touched it since. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange because their origin is explosive, but their presence is restful. They come from heat, pressure, ash, collapse, and deep geologic change. Yet tonight they stand in a cool mountain quiet, holding twilight on their shoulders. This is one of the gifts of geology. It lets fierce beginnings become calm forms. It lets fire turn into shade. It lets ash become a place where oak leaves fall. We keep walking, and the path opens briefly to a view across the ridges. The sky is fading from blue into pearl. Farther slopes lie in layers, each one softer than the one before, until distance becomes haze. The spires rise along the nearer ridgelines in pale ranks, some clear and detailed, some already becoming silhouettes. You can sense the scale now. This is not one odd formation. It is an entire landscape shaped by the same old material, the same patient erosion, the same high desert weather. The word strange can sometimes mean uneasy, but here it feels closer to wondrous. The strangeness comes from recognition and unfamiliarity meeting at once. You know stone, you know towers, you know forests, but here stone behaves almost like a forest, and towers rise with the softness of weathered clay, while the living trees thread themselves among them as though they have always belonged together. The mind becomes quiet because it cannot sort the place too quickly. In the Chiricahua Mountains, elevation adds to that quiet complexity. Warm desert lies below, but the uplands catch cooler air and more moisture. Summer rains can come with a scent of creosote from lower country, damp earth from shaded slopes, and wet rock from the spires themselves. Winter may dust the formations with snow, softening every edge until the pale volcanic towers seem even more dreamlike. Season by season, the same stone accepts different kinds of silence. You can imagine rain moving here after a dry spell. First the smell rises, mineral and alive. Dust darkens, lichens deepen in color. Water slips down vertical grooves and gathers briefly in shallow basins, then seeps into fractures or runs toward washes below. Every drop follows the architecture of the rock. Every little channel remembers the cooling cracks, the joints, the weak zones, and the surfaces left by earlier weathering. Water doesn't carve randomly, it listens to what the stone already is. That is another reason the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires appear so patterned. Their shapes come from structure as much as erosion. The old tuff sheet was divided by joints, and those joints gave water and air a pathway inward. Once weathering began along them, blocks separated. Corners rounded faster than broad faces. Narrow fins became thinner. Columns stood apart. The landscape unfolded from a hidden grid into an open maze, and now we can walk through that revealed geometry as twilight settles around us. The sound of the world remains low. Wind touches the spires and moves on. Leaves stir, then rest. Your steps find a steady rhythm on the trail, and the rhythm feels like a slow counting of distance. Though we are not trying to arrive anywhere quickly, we are letting the place gather around us. We are letting the shapes become familiar enough to feel calm, but unfamiliar enough to keep a small lamp of wonder glowing in the mind. Sometimes a spire narrows near its base, widening above in a way that seems almost impossible, but it makes sense when you remember differential weathering. Harder portions resist, softer portions retreat. A protective upper block may shield what lies beneath, while exposed sides wear back little by little. The shape may look delicate, but it is the result of many small balances, each one held for a while, then changed. Stone balance is not a single event, it is a long pause. We pause with it. The path bends beside a tall, pale column, and for a moment the rock fills most of your vision. There are tiny pits in its surface, fine cracks, darker mineral stains where water has passed. A lichen patch spreads like a quiet map. At the base, broken fragments rest among oak leaves and pine needles, each piece once part of something higher. The spire is not separate from the ground below it. It is slowly becoming the ground. That thought can be restful. Nothing here needs to remain unchanged to be beautiful. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are beautiful because they are changing slowly enough for us to stand with them. They are old, but not finished. They are fragile, but not frantic. Their entire existence is a kind of deep patience, and when we walk among them at dusk, we borrow a little of that patience for ourselves. As the light lowers further, color leaves the stone in stages. Pink becomes gray. Gray becomes blue. Blue becomes shadow. The warmer seams linger for a while, then fade into the same soft darkness as the rest of the wall. This fading makes the spires seem taller, because their bases disappear first among shrubs and fallen rock, while their upper edges remain outlined against the sky. You look up gently, and the stone towers are there like quiet forts continuing above you. The Chiricahua landscape is sometimes called a wonderland of rocks, and tonight that phrase feels accurate in the softest sense. Not a loud wonderland, not a place of spectacle, but a place where ordinary expectations loosen. The trail becomes a thread, the spires become companions, the cooling air becomes part of the story. We are walking through a volcanic past that has been made tender by weather, and every turn gives the same lesson in another shape. The old ashflow tuff holds small clues to its beginning. Within the rock, flattened pumice fragments can sometimes show where hot material compressed under its own weight. Crystals may catch light in tiny points. Bands and variations tell of motion, heat, settling, welding and cooling. The stone is not blank. It is a cooled cloud, a hardened fall, a record of particles that once moved together and then became still enough to hold a mountain's memory. You can let that image settle slowly. A cloud became stone, not a rain cloud, but a volcanic one, dense with ash and heat. It traveled over an older landscape, filled the low places and then became the pale foundation of these strange spires. Later, the rock cracked as it cooled. Later still, water and weather entered the cracks, and after many, many seasons, the towers emerged, not by rising, but by everything around them gently lowering. This is important because the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires can feel as though they were pushed upward from below. Their vertical shapes suggest growth. They seem to have sprouted from the earth like stone trees, but in a quiet geologic sense, they were mostly uncovered. The surrounding rock wore away, the joints widened, the slopes shed fragments. What remains stands high because other material has departed. The spires are remnants, and remnants can be very beautiful. The trail leads us into a darker passage now, and the temperature drops by a small degree that your skin can recognize. The smell of stone becomes cooler. The dust is less sunlit here. In the narrow spaces, evening arrives early, and the sky above becomes a calm ribbon of fading blue. If you speak, you would speak softly. The place invites that. It doesn't demand silence, but it makes silence feel natural. In this half-shadow, you begin to notice how each formation has its own posture. One leans slightly, though its mass is settled. Another stands blunt and square, with a rounded top like a worn shoulder. Another has split into twin shafts, divided by a dark vertical crack, where water and frost have worked patiently. The differences are small enough to soothe the eye, but varied enough to keep you present. The land repeats itself without becoming monotonous. That repetition is part of the sleep of the place. Spire after spire, crack after crack. Oak leaf, stone wall, soft dust, fading sky. The mind can rest inside patterns like these because they offer enough detail to hold attention and enough sameness to let attention drift. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires do this naturally. They are complex, but not hurried. They are strange, but not sharp. They carry the gaze downward into calm, and as we move onward through the cooling stone corridors, the next quiet layer of their strangeness begins to appear in the way this volcanic landscape has become an ecosystem, not just a monument of rock, not just a monument of rock. The stone gives shelter to shade, the shade gives shelter to moisture, and moisture gives shelter to life that could not rest so easily on open desert ground. You can feel this change before you name it. The air beside the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires is not one single air, but many small airs, gathered in pockets between walls and under leaning blocks. One corner may hold the last warmth of afternoon, while another keeps a cool, mineral breath that has barely seen the sun. A narrow passage may smell of dry leaves and shaded soil, while an open ledge smells of dust, pine resin, and stone baked pale by the day. This is how a rock landscape becomes a living landscape. The spires catch shadow, slow wind, collect leaf litter, and give roots a place to grip. Their cracks hold small amounts of water after rain, not for long, but long enough to matter. Their bases catch soil that would otherwise slide away. Around them, plants gather in small communities, each one choosing its own measure of light, slope, shade, and dryness. The whole place becomes a gentle arrangement of refuges. As we walk, you may notice the difference between a sunlit face and a shaded one. On the bright side, the stone is pale and open, with dry grasses and tough shrubs leaning into heat. On the shaded side, the color deepens, and lichens spread more easily across the rock. Pale green, gray, orange, and silver, like quiet weather written on the surface. This pattern repeats through the Chiricahua formations, so the same spire can hold several worlds at once. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange because they don't simply stand in the ecosystem. They shape it. They change where snow lingers, where rain gathers, where seeds can rest, and where wind loses its strength. A seed falling in open gravel may dry quickly, but one caught in a shaded crevice may find a little soil and a cooler morning. A root entering a joint may deepen that joint over many seasons, not by force, but by being present and alive. There is a softness in that thought. The spires look massive, but they are touched constantly by small things. Leaves brush them. Needles fall against them. Rain beads on them. Lichen grows across them so slowly that the eye almost misses the movement. Even the faintest biological presence becomes part of the long shaping of the stone, and the stone, in return, makes room for those lives to continue. Nothing here is separate for very long. You hear this in the way sound behaves among the towers. In open country, wind may pass broadly and then vanish. Here, it moves in thin ribbons, slipping around corners, stirring oak leaves, then settling again in the next quiet chamber of rock. Your footsteps are sometimes crisp on gravel and sometimes muffled by soil and fallen leaves. The sound does not travel far. The spires gather it, soften it, and hand it back to the evening. The plants seem arranged by a very old, patient intelligence, though the intelligence is only climate, stone, water, and time. Oaks grow where their roots can hold. Junipers stand with twisted trunks where the ground is leaner. Pines lift above the walls, placing green needles against the wide, pale sky. Agaves and yuccas keep to drier openings, their shapes spare and sculptural beside the sculptural rock. All of it feels composed, yet nothing was planned. This is part of why the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires feel so dreamlike. The rocks resemble architecture, and the plants resemble a garden, but both were made without design in the human sense. The passageways, courtyards, pillars, and windows are the outcome of fractures and weather. The living edges are the outcome of roots and seeds finding permission in stone. We walk through it slowly, and the mind keeps wanting to call it built, even as the body knows it is wild. And as the trail bends beneath a leaning wall, the story of water becomes quieter but more important, because in a dry mountain landscape, even brief water leaves a long memory. Rain may fall for only a little while, yet its path through the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires can guide erosion for centuries. You can picture a summer rain arriving after heat has rested on the rocks all afternoon. The first drops darken the dust. The smell rises quickly, sharp at first, then warm and earthy, as if the ground has opened a small hidden door. Water runs down the faces of the spires in dark threads, following grooves so fine they are almost invisible when dry. It gathers under overhangs, slips into cracks, and carries tiny loosened grains toward the bases of the towers. In a wetter place, water might seem abundant enough to blur its own tracks. Here, each passing matters. The dry air gives every channel a clearer shape. A trickle may last only minutes, but it repeats along the same weakness year after year. The rock accepts the pattern gradually. A groove deepens, a joint widens, a small hollow forms where water pauses. Then another season comes, and the same quiet route is taken again. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires owe much of their present shape to this repeated softness. Rainwater enters fractures opened by cooling and stress. If nights grow cold enough, water can expand in tiny spaces and help loosen the rock. In warmer seasons, chemical weathering works more slowly, altering minerals, weakening grains, and allowing surfaces to crumble with a fine sandy texture. None of this feels dramatic when you stand here. It feels more like breathing. The strange towers are not carved by a single grand gesture. They are shaped by repetition. Heat and cool, wet and dry, shade and sun. A little swelling, a little shrinking, a little loosening, a little falling away. The process is so patient that it becomes hard to separate erosion from rest. The land is changing, but at a pace that makes change feel like stillness. You can see small aprons of fallen material at the base of some formations. These are not ruins in any sad sense. They are the lower part of the same story. A grain that falls from a spire becomes part of the trail. A flake that breaks away makes soil for a root. A block that settles beside a wall changes the flow of water around it. The landscape doesn't lose itself by weathering. It becomes more of itself in another form. As you move beside the rock, the texture of the ground shifts underfoot. There is fine dust in some places, coarse gravel in others, and here and there a firmer surface where the trail has been held by stone. The smell of dry mineral earth is steady now, with a faint sweetness from leaf litter resting in shaded pockets. The evening has cooled enough that the air feels clear inside the nose and soft along the arms. The spires keep standing in their patient rows. Water also explains the rounded edges. Freshly broken volcanic tuff can be angular, but exposed edges soften as weather reaches them from several directions. Corners receive attack from both sides and wear back faster than broad faces. Narrow blocks become rounded columns. Wider masses turn into domes, shoulders and thick walls. This rounding gives the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires their calm, almost bodily presence, as if the stone has been smoothed by time into something that can be approached without fear. That approachability matters for the mood of the place. Even when a tower is tall, its weathered surface feels old and touchable. Even when a passage is narrow, it feels formed by patience rather than threat. The color is gentle too, especially near dusk, when pale stone gathers lavender shade and rust stains warm softly in the last light. You are surrounded by evidence of deep geologic change, but the feeling in the body is rest, and below that rest is the memory of the ancient ash. When water moves through the spires, it is moving through the settled remains of a volcanic cloud. When roots enter cracks, they enter cooled ash that became stone. When lichens spread across a face, they are living on a surface made from material once carried in heat and air. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires hold this contradiction quietly, and contradiction is often what makes a landscape feel mysterious. We continue downward by small degrees, though the trail may rise and dip in its own way. In a landscape like this, descent is not only elevation, it is attention. We descend from the large outline into the smaller detail, from the towers into the cracks, from the cracks into the grains, from the grains into the vanished eruption that made them. Each step asks us to look more slowly. Each turn gives us another version of the same ancient question. Why do these spires feel so strange? Because they are ash that behaves like architecture. Because they are remnants that look like growth. Because they are massive and fragile together. Because they make shade, soil, shelter, and passage from a volcanic sheet that once covered the land in a single hot breath. And because the human mind recognizes their forms, towers, rooms, corridors, pillars, but cannot quite place them in the ordinary world. The sky above the rock has dimmed now into a quiet blue. The first coolness of night touches the high ridges. The spires no longer show every color, but their shapes grow more pronounced. Edges that were pale and soft in daylight become dark lines against the fading sky. Cracks deepen. Openings between towers become small doorways of shadow. You are not entering darkness suddenly. You are letting it gather around you with the same patience the stone has kept for millions of years. And as the light fades, the next layer of the Chiricahua story becomes the way these towers hold time, not as an idea, but as a physical presence you can stand beside. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are not merely old, they are old in several directions at once. Their material began in a volcanic event from deep geologic time, but their present shapes are younger, sculpted gradually after the ash hardened and the mountain weathered. The plants around them are younger still, arriving, shifting, dying back and returning across seasons and climates. The trail beneath your feet is younger than all of that, a brief line of passage through a place whose main rhythms far exceed a human life. When you stand here, you stand among overlapping clocks. There is comfort in that, if you let it be comfort. Your breath moves in seconds. Evening gathers in minutes. A plant grows across years. A spire changes across ages. The mountain lifts and wears down across spans almost too wide to imagine. Yet all these rhythms meet in the same quiet air. You inhale the scent of juniper and dust, and the old volcanic tuff stands beside you, accepting the same twilight. This is one reason sleep comes naturally to landscapes like Chiricahua. They loosen the scale of worry. The mind that has been moving quickly all day begins to notice slower measures. The body hears gravel, wind, leaves, and the soft enclosure of stone, and it remembers that not everything needs to answer quickly. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires do not hurry. They do not explain themselves loudly. They simply let time be visible. If you look at a single tower, you can read some of that time in its shape. The top may be capped by harder material, keeping a broad, protective form. The middle may be narrowed by weathering along joints. The lower part may be partly hidden by fallen blocks and soil. Lichens mark surfaces that have stayed exposed long enough for life to settle there. Fresher breaks appear cleaner and lighter. Every face carries several ages at once. The stone also carries the cooling history of the ash flow. As the hot deposit settled, the upper parts cooled differently than the deeper parts. Welding varied with temperature, thickness, and pressure. Gas escaped. Minerals altered. Shrinkage opened fractures. Later erosion removed overlying material and exposed what had been buried. So even before rain and wind shaped the spires, the rock had internal differences. hidden tendencies that would influence every future form. This is why the spires are so varied. The landscape is not a collection of identical columns because the rock was never perfectly uniform. Some zones were more welded, some were more porous, some were fractured more closely, some layers resisted, while others yielded. The result is a quiet abundance of forms, from slender needles to rounded domes, from tight corridors to broad walls, from balanced stones to broken talus slopes where the same material rests in another posture. You can let your eyes move slowly across these differences. There is no need to count them. One formation catches a line of fading sky along its edge. Another holds a dark vertical cleft. Another rises with a soft swelling shape, then narrows into a pale neck beneath a heavier top. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires repeat their themes in endless variations, and the repetition becomes soothing, like waves arriving on a shore you cannot quite see. In the quiet, the scientific explanation and the sensory experience become the same thing. Differential erosion is the cool shadow under an overhang. Welded tuff is the rough surface beneath your fingertips. Jointing is the narrow passage where the air turns still. Ash flow history is the pale wall that keeps the last light. Geology is not distant here. It is all around you, close enough to smell as dust, close enough to hear as gravel underfoot. The longer we stay with the spires, the more their strangeness becomes less like an oddity and more like a form of honesty. The land is showing its making. It is not covered by thick soil or hidden under dense forest. It allows the old volcanic body to stand exposed, broken open by time, softened by weather, and inhabited by plants. You can see process here. You can see origin and change sharing the same surface. This openness gives the Chiricahua formations a dreamlike clarity. Many landscapes hide their beginnings under later layers, but here the old ash remains present. It forms walls, it forms pinnacles, it forms balanced rocks and narrow trailside chambers. It holds the roots of oaks and the shadows of evening. You are not looking at a distant past through glass. You are walking inside its weathered remains, and the past is quiet enough to let you rest. And as night gathers more deeply around the towers, we move from the visible shapes into the feeling of shelter they create, because the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange not only in how they look, but in how they make space feel. A bare slope opens the body outward, but a spire garden gathers the body inward. The path enters another corridor where the walls rise close and pale, and the sky becomes a narrow, cooling strip above. The air is still here. It carries the dry mineral scent of the rock, the faint powder of dust, and the darker smell of leaves that have gathered in cracks along the base. Even without touching the wall, you sense its presence along your side. Stone changes the body's awareness. It gives the quiet a shape. This enclosed feeling is one of the gentle surprises of Chiricahua. You are outside, under open sky, yet the spires create rooms, doorways, alcoves, and chambers. Some spaces are wide enough for a small grove of trees. Others are narrow enough that the light thins and footsteps soften. The forms are natural, but the mind keeps borrowing architectural words because the spaces feel made for passage. We know they were not designed, and still they feel welcoming. The science behind that feeling begins with fracture patterns. Joints divide rock into blocks. Erosion removes some blocks and leaves others. Where fractures are close together, narrow corridors can form. Where wider masses resist, walls and pillars remain. Where blocks fall away, openings appear. The landscape becomes a labyrinth, but a gentle one, shaped by the internal structure of the rock and by the long work of water, temperature, gravity, and time. You may feel how a turn in the trail changes everything. One moment, the view is held close by stone. The next, it opens to a slope of trees and distant ridges. Then it closes again. This alternation, open and enclosed, near and far, is part of the calm rhythm. It gives the wandering mind something steady to follow. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires become not just objects in the landscape, but makers of rhythm, shaping how you move and how you breathe. Light behaves differently here, too. In open spaces, dusk spreads evenly across the ground. Among the spires, it pools, filters, and lingers. A high ledge may glow after the passage below has fallen into blue shadow. A narrow crack may hold darkness even while the sky remains bright. A pale wall may reflect a final softness onto leaves beneath it, giving them a muted silver edge. The stone does not merely receive light, it rearranges it. That rearranged light is part of their strangeness. At noon, the spires may appear stark and detailed. At evening, they become layered and tender. After rain, their colors deepen and hidden stains appear. In winter light, their pale surfaces can look almost lunar against dark branches. In moonlight, they may lose texture and become pure shape. The same towers change their mood with the sky, and the place never needs to move quickly to feel alive. The soundscape changes with the shapes as well. A breeze passing through a narrow gap can make a low, soft movement, while nearby air remains still. A small pebble shifted underfoot may sound close and clear, then vanish immediately into the walls. Leaves moving above can seem distant even when they are near, because the stone breaks the sound into gentle fragments. You listen without effort. The landscape teaches the ear to slow down. In this sheltered space, the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires feel less like a spectacle and more like a companionable presence. They stand beside you without asking for attention, yet attention keeps returning to them. Their surfaces are not polished or grand. They are weathered, pitted, stained, and softened. That weathering gives them kindness. It removes the feeling of sharp newness. It makes the stone seem ancient enough to be trusted by the body. There is also a kind of humility in their formation. The spires are what remains after loss. Much of the original ashflow deposit has been removed from around them, carried away grain by grain, fragment by fragment, season by season. Yet what remains does not feel diminished. It feels revealed. The landscape shows that removal can be a form of making. To become a spire, the rock had to lose the surrounding rock that once held it. This can be a restful thought for a half-awake mind. The strange beauty here comes from subtraction. The land did not add towers onto itself. It let the weaker stone go. It allowed passages to open, walls to separate, shapes to stand apart. In the quiet of evening, that feels almost like breathing out. Something unnecessary leaves, something hidden appears. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are, in that sense, a landscape of release. As we continue, the corridor widens and a cluster of columns rises on the left, their tops rounded, their sides marked by vertical seams. The bases are shadowed by shrubs and broken blocks. Above them, the sky has gone deeper, and the first faint stars may be imagined even before they show. The stone's color has cooled to blue-gray. It feels as if the whole mountain is settling into a slower temperature, and we are settling with it. And as the outer light grows softer, the inner details become quieter, drawing us toward the mineral life of the rock itself. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange, because even their surfaces seem to hold weather-like memory, every stain and texture telling a small, slow part of the larger story. On some faces you see dark streaks where water has carried minerals downward. On others, pale patches show where surfaces have flaked or where lichen has not yet taken hold. Tiny pits collect shadow. Thin cracks run downward, sometimes straight, sometimes wandering. There are places where the rock looks almost granular, as if it might return to ash under your fingertips, and places where it appears dense and firm, holding its form against the long weather of the mountain. Rhyolitic tuff can vary in texture because its original particles varied. Ash, pumice, crystal fragments, and bits of older rock may all be held in the welded mass. Some fragments were stretched or flattened while the deposit remained hot. Others stayed more distinct. Over time, weathering brings these differences into relief. Softer bits loosen, harder bits stand out. The surface becomes a record of uneven resistance, and uneven resistance is what gives the spires so much character. You don't need to read every mark. It is enough to sense that the stone is not mute. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires speak in texture, and their language is slow. A fluted groove says water has passed here often. A rounded edge says this corner has been touched from several sides. A dark stain says minerals moved with moisture. A lichen patch says stillness lasted long enough for life to settle. Each mark is quiet, but together they make a deep murmur of time. The smell of the rock changes as the air cools. Warm dust gives way to a cleaner mineral scent, and the leaf litter at the base of the walls grows more noticeable. There is a faint dryness in the throat, the kind that belongs to high desert evenings, but the shaded air feels gentle. Your breathing finds the rhythm of walking. In this rhythm, the textures of stone become almost like a slow, tactile music. If you imagine touching the rock, you might feel rough grains, shallow hollows, and the slight chalky dryness of weathered volcanic material. The surface has been opened by sun, rain, and time. It is not polished smooth because this is not a river stone rolled in water. It is an exposed mountain stone, shaped from the outside inward. Its roughness is part of its honesty. It tells you the spire is still becoming. Some of the strangest forms come from joints that intersect. Where vertical cracks meet horizontal weaknesses, blocks can separate in steps. A cap may remain while the column below narrows. A wall may split into a row of towers. A slab may detach, tumble, and leave a fresh plane exposed. The patterns can seem almost intentional, but the intention belongs to physics, chemistry, and patience. Nature often looks designed when many simple processes repeat for a long time. This is why the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires do not need drama to feel extraordinary. Their wonder is cumulative. One crack is small, one rainstorm is brief, one warm afternoon is ordinary, one cold night is passing. But repeated over vast time, these small events turn a welded ash sheet into a stone city of pillars, corridors, balanced rocks, shaded gardens, and quiet rooms. The result feels impossible only because we cannot feel all those repetitions at once. Standing among them, you can almost sense time falling like fine dust. Not loudly, not visibly from moment to moment, but steadily, in the way a surface rounds, a flake loosens, a seed roots, a shadow cools, a groove darkens after rain. The landscape is not still because nothing happens. It is still because everything happens slowly enough to become peaceful. There is a particular calm in volcanic landscapes after the fire is long gone. The origin may have been hot, turbulent, and immense, but the present is often spare and quiet. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires carry that calm beautifully. They are cooled fire, lifted into mountain air, weathered into pale forms, softened by plants, and held under a sky that changes color without hurrying. The old eruption has become a place for shade. As we pass another wall, a narrow opening appears between two columns. Through it, you can see a farther slope, blurred now by evening. That small view feels like a window, though it was made by erosion. The mind rests in that illusion. It is pleasant to see natural windows in the rock because they join enclosure and openness at once. They let the landscape look back through itself. They make depth visible. Openings like these form where fractures and weathering remove weaker sections, leaving stronger parts around them. Sometimes a crack widens until daylight passes through. Sometimes an alcove deepens beneath a harder roof. Sometimes separate towers frame a view simply because the rock between them has worn away. The details vary, but the feeling is similar. The spires create thresholds, and walking through thresholds gives the journey a gentle rhythm. You are still in the same landscape, but each threshold makes it feel newly entered. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are generous that way. They offer repetition without sameness. A passage, then a chamber, a pillar, then a wall, a ledge, then a view, a shaded grove, then an open slope. The mind can drift and return, always finding the stone waiting in another patient form. And as we move farther through these natural thresholds, the higher story of the Sky Island begins to surround the spires again, because Chiricahua is not only stone rising from stone, but a mountain world lifted above the warmer lands around it. The air itself changes with height, and the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires stand inside that lifted air. Sky Islands are mountain ranges that rise like cool islands above surrounding dry lowlands. In southeastern Arizona, they gather moisture, shade, and life in ways that the lower desert cannot. You can feel this in the mix of plants where desert forms and woodland forms share the same slopes. The spires add another layer to that variety, making small cool places and warm places, small dry places and slightly moister ones. Elevation and stone work together. This gives Chiricahua a rich quietness. It is not lush in the way a wet forest is lush, but it is intricate. Oak leaves make a leathery whisper. Juniper berries hold a faint resin scent. Pine needles soften patches of ground. Agave leaves hold their still sculpted blue-green forms in open light. Grasses catch the last glow near the trail. Every plant seems to know exactly how much the mountain can give, and exactly how to live within that measure. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires make that measure more varied. A north-facing wall may hold coolness longer. A south-facing slope may dry quickly. A crack may shelter a small root from heat. A ledge may catch enough soil for a tuft of grass. At the base of a tower, fallen fragments can slow runoff and create a small pocket of earth. This is ecosystem as architecture, though no architect is present. It is structure becoming habitat. You can imagine the seasons moving through this high place. In spring, small blossoms may appear in pockets of soil, delicate against the weathered stone. In summer, clouds build slowly, and rain darkens the spires in vertical streaks. In autumn, oak leaves dry and curl, adding a faint papery scent to the air. In winter, cold settles in shaded corridors, and the pale towers hold a spare, quiet light. The forms remain, while the mood of the place changes around them. That seasonal change is another slow rhythm for sleep. The landscape does not repeat one night only. It repeats across years, each return slightly different. Rainfall varies, plants respond, rock loosens, soil gathers, a young root thickens. A lichen colony spreads a little wider. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires stand through these changes, not unchanged, but changing at a rate that makes them seem like guardians of a slower world. The word guardian can sound too human, and the spires are not watching over anything in a human way. Still, they create the feeling of presence. Their height and number make the trail feel accompanied. Their shadows move across the ground with the sun. Their surface is cool and warm through the day. Their cracks hold leaves, water, and roots. They do what stone does, and that is enough to give the place a deep companionship. As darkness increases, the plants become mostly shape and scent. The oaks are rounded masses. The junipers are darker, denser forms. The pines are high silhouettes against the sky. The agaves hold their pointed leaves in low starbursts near the ground. The spires rise among them, taller and paler, catching whatever light remains. In this hour, geology and ecology merge into one quiet silhouette, and the whole slope seems to exhale. The strangeness of the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires includes this merging. If the towers stood alone on bare ground, they would be wondrous, but colder. If the woodland stood without the towers, it would be peaceful, but less uncanny. Together, stone and life make a landscape that feels both ancient and inhabited, both mineral and breathing. You walk through it with a slower mind, feeling how the world can be still and full at the same time. And beneath the living surface, the old volcanic foundation continues everywhere. Soil here is not a separate story from rock. It is weathered rock, mixed with fallen leaves, roots, dust, and the small remains of many seasons. The ground beneath the trees has been made in part from the same ashflow tuff that rises as spires. High walls and fine soil are different states of one material, separated by time and weather. The mountain keeps recycling its own memory. This gives every step a kind of continuity. Your foot rests on grains that may once have belonged to a wall. A nearby root grips material that may once have been ash drifting in a volcanic cloud. A lichen grows on stone that will someday loosen into soil. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires make it possible to see this cycle without hurry. Stone, soil, plant, shadow, and stone again. Nothing leaves the story entirely. We move on, and the path passes beneath another cluster of high, narrow towers. Their tops are now dark against the deepening sky, while their bases are swallowed by shadow. You may feel a small coolness settling near the ground, where the day's warmth is slipping away. The smell of dry leaves becomes more present. A faint current of air moves down the passage, as if the mountain itself were breathing through the stone. And as we descend into that cooler breath, the next quiet mystery is how a landscape born from heat can become a place of shade, rest, and nighttime softness. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires turn the memory of fire into the feeling of shelter. This is not a contradiction the land needs to resolve. Fire and rest belong to different moments in the same long story. The eruption made the material, but time changed its meaning. What was once airborne heat became welded rock. What was once a sheet became towers. What was once exposed stone became habitat. Now the spires catch moonlight, hold shadows, and soften wind. The old fire is still present only as form. You can feel that transformation in the cooling walls. During the day, they gathered sunlight. Now they release it slowly into the evening, so the air near them may feel faintly warmer than the open path, while shaded cracks remain cool. This unevenness is gentle against the skin. It makes walking among the spires feel like moving through soft layers of temperature. Warm wall, cool hollow, dry opening, shaded turn. The body notices before the mind explains. The science is simple and beautiful. Rock has thermal mass. It stores heat and releases it slowly. Darker surfaces warm differently than pale ones. Shaded faces remain cooler than sunlit faces. Narrow spaces trap air in ways open slopes do not. These small differences create microclimates, and microclimates shape where plants grow, where moisture persists, and how weathering proceeds. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are not passive shapes. They are slow regulators of light, heat, and air. At night, this becomes even clearer. Cool air often settles in low places, while rock walls release the day's stored warmth. Temperature differences guide tiny movements of air through passages and around towers. You may not feel them strongly, but the landscape feels subtly alive because of them. A faint draft touches your cheek. A warmer pocket lingers beside a wall. A colder hollow gathers near a shaded base. The mountain breathes through gradients too small to hurry. In this way, the spires are strange because they behave almost like weather instruments. They record warmth in exposed edges. They record biological time in lichen and roots. They record geologic time in fractures, welding, and erosion. Every part of the landscape measures something, not with numbers, but with form. To walk here is to move through a library written in stone and temperature. The night deepens slowly, and the sky becomes wider above the passages. The spires no longer show their fine textures unless you are close to them, but their outlines remain distinct. Some are blunt, some are slender, some lean slightly toward one another, framing a patch of dim sky between them. The path feels softer now, as if darkness has laid a quiet cloth over the gravel. Your attention becomes less visual and more bodily. You notice the air on your face. You notice the dry scent of the trail. You notice the way your footsteps create a small rhythm and then disappear. You notice the presence of the stone as a nearness, even when you cannot see every detail. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires at night become less like objects and more like a surrounding condition, a calm mineral hush that shapes the space through which you move. There is a deep sleepiness in old volcanic ground after sunset. Not emptiness, but a settled, folded quiet. The heat of origin is unimaginably far away. The heat of afternoon is leaving. The heat of the body is small and temporary. Around you, the stone holds a cooler patience. It has passed through fire, burial, cracking, weathering, and exposure, and now it does something simple. It stands in the dark. Standing can be enough. That may be one of the softer lessons of the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires. They do not bloom quickly or flow visibly. They do not ask to be interpreted every moment. They offer a presence that is mostly vertical, mostly silent, mostly patient. The mind, which often wants motion and answer, can rest against a landscape whose main act is remaining, and still, remaining is not the same as stopping. A spire remains by changing slowly. It sheds grains. It receives rain. It warms and cools. It holds lichens. It gives shade. It may one day narrow too much and let a higher block settle down, not as disaster, but as continuation. The landscape accepts these changes without hurry. It has no final shape it must protect. Its beauty is the ongoing balance between standing and becoming. As the passage opens again, a wider view returns. The slopes beyond are shadowed now, and the forest gathers into dark masses below the pale towers. The horizon is almost gone, absorbed into the night. Above, the sky has deepened into a soft, clear darkness. The spires stand between earth and sky, not as barriers, but as slow vertical lines connecting the cooled volcanic ground to the evening air. And as we keep moving through this darkness, The question of why they are so strange becomes even softer, because the answer is no longer a single fact, but a feeling made from many facts. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange, because they let us feel deep time as a place we can wander through. Deep time is usually difficult to hold. Millions of years can become an empty phrase, too large for the mind to touch. But here, time has made shapes. It has made towers you can stand beside. It has made corridors you can enter. It has made shadowed walls where plants grow from cracks. It has made balanced stones that pause in their own long weathering. The scale becomes physical. You do not understand it all at once. You breathe inside it. The ash that formed this rock was laid down around 27 million years ago, in a world very different from the one we know tonight. Since then, climates have shifted, mountains have worn, valleys have changed, plants and animals have come and gone, and the volcanic deposit has been opened into this maze of spires. That number is too large to feel directly, but the stone makes it gentle. It says, "Not everything old is distant. Some old things can be near. You stand near them now, in the cooling air. You see their silhouettes. You smell dust, leaves, and faint resin. You hear the small sound of your own movement." This closeness makes the ancient feel intimate. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are not an abstraction on a page. They are the walls around the path, the pale shapes against the sky, the rough surfaces holding the last warmth of a day that is already passing. There is a quiet kindness in landscapes that place human time beside geologic time without diminishing either. Your evening matters because you are here to feel it. The mountains' millions of years matter because they made this evening possible. The two times meet for a while, and neither has to explain itself. You are small, but not erased. The spires are immense in age, but not unapproachable. Both can share the same hush. This balance helps sleep because it loosens the sense of urgency. If the mind is still carrying the noise of the day, the spires offer another scale. They remind you that many things take time, and some changes are too slow to worry over in a single night. A crack may widen across centuries. A surface may round across ages. A forest may shift with climate, elevation, and season. For now, there is only the next breath and the next quiet step. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange then, because they are both evidence and atmosphere. They show the evidence of volcanic ash, welding, cooling joints, erosion, and microclimate. But they also create an atmosphere of stillness, enclosure, wonder, and rest. The facts do not break the spell. They deepen it. Knowing that a spire began as ash makes it more mysterious, not less. Knowing that weather carved the corridors makes them feel more patient. You can let each explanation sink rather than settle sharply. Rhyolite means silica-rich volcanic material. Tuff means compacted ash. Welding means hot particles pressed and fused together. Joints mean cracks formed as the rock cooled and stressed. Erosion means weather removed what could be removed. These words are not hard tonight. They are soft markers in the dark, helping us understand why the stone around us looks so unlike ordinary hillsides. And still, understanding does not exhaust the place. There is always more than explanation. There is the particular color of a wall after sunset. There is the way a juniper grows from an unlikely ledge. There is a narrow view framed by two towers. There is the silence inside a passage where wind has paused. There is the feeling that the land is both ancient and present, immense and close, strange and gently familiar. As we walk, you might imagine the original ash sheet stretching broadly across this region after the eruption, not yet divided into spires. It would have cooled as a mass, contracted, cracked and settled. Later, uplift and erosion exposed it. Streams and slopes began to cut through it. Weather found joints. The first separations widened. Blocks emerged. Ridges sharpened. Columns stood. What we see now is not the beginning, but a later chapter written by removal. Removal can make beauty visible. This thought returns because the spires keep showing it. The spaces between them are as important as the towers themselves. Without the openings, the formations would be a wall. Without the corridors, we could not move through them. Without the shadowed gaps, there would be less coolness. less mystery, less sense of passage. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are made of stone, but their feeling depends just as much on the spaces where stone has gone. The spaces are filled now with dusk. They are filled with the scent of the mountain, with dry leaves and cooling mineral air. They are filled with the hush after wind has passed. They are filled with your slow attention. In daylight, you might look mostly at the stone. At nightfall, you begin to feel the spaces between stones as part of the landscape's body. The absence becomes gentle, and as those spaces darken, we move into another slow understanding, the way the spires guide movement without ever moving themselves. Trails curve because rock stands in the way, and the body follows the old decisions of erosion. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires shape not only the view, but the very path of wandering. A path through this terrain rarely feels straight for long. It bends around pillars, slips between walls, rises over stone steps, and opens briefly before narrowing again. Even if people choose where to walk, the stone gives the choices their shape. A narrow gap invites passage. A fallen block asks the trail to turn. A steep wall holds the route to one side. In this way, geology becomes movement. Ancient fractures decide the rhythm of your feet. You can feel that rhythm now. Your steps are measured. Your breath is steady. Each curve reveals another quiet arrangement of rock and tree. Nothing leaps out. Nothing changes harshly. The landscape unfolds by degrees, which is the kind of movement sleep understands. A slow turn, a softened view, a deeper shade, a cooler breath. The mind follows because the path does not demand. It only leads. The spires also guide water this way. A raindrop does not choose broadly on a flat surface. It follows slope, groove, crack, and texture. It may travel down one side of a pillar, pause in a shallow hollow, join another trickle, then fall to the base where soil and leaflet await. Over time, these small guided movements alter the rock and feed the living pockets around it. Water walks the spires too, in its own brief, shining steps. Wind follows passages as well. It slides around towers, accelerates softly through narrow gaps, and rests in sheltered alcoves. Seeds follow wind. Dust follows wind. Scents follow wind. The spires make subtle currents that help move the small materials of the ecosystem. What looks still to the eye may be full of gentle pathways for air, water, warmth, and life. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are fixed in place, yet they organize motion all around them. This is another layer of their strangeness. They are immobile shapes that choreograph change. They do not walk, but they direct walking. They do not flow, but they guide water. They do not breathe, but they shape wind. They do not grow, but they make places where growth can happen. The more you notice this, the less the landscape feels like a collection of separate objects. It feels like a single, slow system. You might feel that system in the way cool air settles lower along the path. You might smell where leaves have gathered in a sheltered pocket. You might see a darker streak that marks the route of rain. You might notice how a root curves toward a crack, or how a small patch of grass grows where stone fragments have trapped soil. Each detail is quiet, but each belongs to the whole. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are not strange because they ignore natural rules. They are strange because they reveal those rules so clearly and so beautifully. Cooling makes cracks. Cracks guide water. Water weakens stone. Weak stone leaves. Stronger stone remains. Remaining stone creates shade. Shade holds life. Life touches stone. Stone becomes soil. Soil holds more life. The rules are simple, but the result is a maze of pale towers under a darkening sky. That is often how wonder works in geology. Simple processes, repeated patiently, make forms that feel beyond simple. A grain loosened by weather is not surprising. A crack widened by water is not surprising. A column left standing after erosion is not surprising by itself. But thousands of columns, corridors, windows, balanced blocks, and shaded plant pockets together become a landscape that feels almost unreal. The ordinary becomes strange through depth of time. As we move, the path grows quieter still. The darkness has softened the hard edges of the day. The spires are mostly silhouettes now, but you know their textures remain, waiting under the night. If moonlight came, it would find them. If rain came, it would darken them. If morning came, it would return their colors one by one. For now, we let them be shapes in the cool air, and we keep walking with them. And as the shapes grow darker, our attention can settle into the lower parts of the formations, where fallen stone, soil, and roots show the spires not as isolated towers, but as part of a continuing descent into the ground. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires rise upward, yet their story is always moving downward too. At their bases, fragments gather in quiet piles. Some are small enough to become gravel. Some are broad slabs resting at angles. Some are rounded from long exposure, while others show fresher edges where they have separated more recently. Leaves collect among them. Soil filters down. Roots pass through gaps. Rainwater slows, sinks, and moves on. The base of a spire is a meeting place between height and return. This downward movement is not sad. It is the way the land renews its surface. A tower gives material to the slope. The slope carries material toward washes. Washes carry it farther, grain by grain, into lower ground. Along the way, some of it becomes soil, some becomes sediment, some rests for a while behind roots or stones. The old volcanic ash continues its journey, long after it became rock, long after it became spire. You can hear that journey faintly underfoot. Gravel shifts with a dry whisper. Dust softens the step. A small stone may roll a little and then come to rest. These are tiny sounds, but they belong to the same process that shaped the entire landscape. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are not only the tall forms above you, they are also the grains beneath you, the slope around you, the soil that holds the plants beside the trail. This continuity makes the place feel whole. The towers do not stand apart from their own weathering. The fallen pieces are not failures of the spires. They are the spires in another phase. The soil is not separate from the volcanic story. It is the volcanic story made fine enough for roots. Even the dust in the air carries a little of the mountain, lifted briefly, then laid down again somewhere nearby. The smell near the ground is different from the smell near the walls. It is earthier, more mixed, with dry leaves, old needles, mineral dust, and the faint sweetness of plant matter breaking down slowly in an arid climate. If you crouched near a sheltered base, the air might feel cooler and more still. The shadow would be deeper. Small materials would gather there because the spire has interrupted wind and water just enough to let them rest. Rest is everywhere in this landscape, but it is active rest. Materials pause before moving again. Water pauses in hollows. Seeds pause in soil pockets. Heat pauses in stone. Shadows pause in passages. Your own attention pauses on a surface, then moves to another. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires teach a form of rest that is not emptiness, but slowed exchange. Everything is giving and receiving, only very quietly. At the base of a large formation, you may see how undercutting begins. Softer material near the ground can weather away more quickly, especially where moisture and salts gather, or where splashing rain repeatedly strikes. Higher rock may remain wider for a while, creating a balanced shape. The result can look delicate, but it is simply the visible moment of uneven weathering. The spire is holding its shape for now, and for now is a meaningful span in geology. For now may be centuries, it may be longer, it may be shorter for a small block already loosened by cracks. The landscape has its own sense of timing, and it does not need to match ours. That difference can feel soothing. We are allowed to be temporary here. We are allowed to pass through a place that was forming long before us and will continue after us, without needing to possess it. We can simply walk, breathe, and notice. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange because they make impermanence look calm. Nothing about them is permanent in the absolute sense, yet they stand with deep composure. Their impermanence is stretched across so much time that it becomes a kind of stillness. A half-awake listener can rest there, in the thought that change does not always arrive as disruption. Sometimes it arrives as dust at the base of a wall, as a widening crack, as a softer edge. The passage opens again, and the ground slopes gently. Ahead, more towers stand in rows, some close, some partly hidden behind dark trees. The air is now cool enough that warmth has left the open stones, though some walls still hold a faint remnant of day. The sky is deep and quiet above them. We keep moving, not toward an ending, but deeper into the calm arrangement of rock, shadow, and old volcanic memory. And as we continue through that arrangement, the place begins to feel less like a question and more like an answer given slowly, one formation at a time. Why are the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires so strange? Because the earth here allowed ash, heat, fracture, weather, and life to become a landscape that resembles a dream, while remaining completely real. The realness matters. This is not fantasy stone. It is welded volcanic tuff, altered by measurable processes. The spires have mineral grains, fracture networks, density differences, weathering patterns, and ecological roles. Their shapes can be explained, mapped, and studied. And still, when you stand among them in the evening, they feel otherworldly. Science does not remove that feeling. It gives the feeling roots. You can let those roots go down through the story. First, the magma formed deep below, silica-rich and thick. Then eruption fragmented it into ash and pumice. Then hot flows spread across the land and settled in great deposits. Then heat and pressure welded those deposits into rock. Then cooling and stress made joints. Then erosion entered. Then plants arrived. Then trails wound through. Then we came quietly at dusk, listening to what remains. Each step is simple when held alone, but together they form a chain so long and delicate, but wonder becomes the natural response. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are the visible middle of that chain. They are not the beginning, because their material began deeper and hotter. They are not the end, because weathering continues. They are a long, beautiful pause in between, and we are walking inside that pause. The breeze has fallen nearly still. The silence now has more depth than before. Not absolute silence, because the world rarely offers that, but a layered hush made of distant air, settled leaves, and the faint scrape of a foot on mineral ground. The spires seem to hold that hush vertically, carrying it upward from the path to the sky. You may feel your thoughts thinning a little, becoming less separate from the quiet around them. This is where the strange forms become restful rather than merely curious. The eye no longer needs to name each tower. It can simply receive them. Pale shape, dark gap, soft slope, high edge, hidden crack, open sky. Again and again, the landscape offers variation without urgency. The mind drifts along these forms, the way water drifts along a channel, guided but unforced. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires become a kind of slow current made of stone. A current made of stone sounds impossible, yet that is how the place feels. Movement has been translated into form. The eruption moved, ash flowed, heat moved through the deposit, cracks opened, water moved down joints, wind moved through passages, gravity moved blocks down slope. All those movements have left standing shapes, and now the shapes guide your own slower movement through the darkening mountain. Motion has become stillness, and stillness has become motion again. In that exchange, there is a deep peace. The land is not frozen. It is not finished. It is not trying to impress. It is doing what landscapes do when given enough time. It is accepting weather. It is making soil. It is holding roots. It is letting towers stand and fall. It is receiving light and releasing heat. It is becoming itself over and over, with no hurry at all. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange because they allow us to see becoming as a shape. Usually, becoming is invisible. We see before and after, but not the slow middle. Here, the slow middle surrounds us. A spire is between ash and sediment. A crack is between closed stone and open passage. A soil pocket is between bare rock and plant life. A balanced block is between attachment and return. The whole landscape is a threshold. Walking through thresholds at night has a gentle effect on the body. Each passage narrows the world, then releases it. Each opening gives a little sky. Each wall gives a little shelter. The rhythm is close to breathing, and the body understands it without needing words. Inhale as the view opens. Exhale as the stone gathers around you. Inhale with the sky. Exhale with the shadow. Slowly, the place and the breath begin to share one pace. We keep that pace as the trail curves again. A low wall runs beside us, its top uneven, its face dark and cool. Beyond it, a tall column rises alone, though its base is hidden among shrubs and stone fragments. It seems solitary at first, but nothing here is truly alone. It belongs to the same ash flow sheet, the same fracture network, the same weathering system, the same sky island slope, the same night air moving softly through the rocks. That belonging is another quiet answer. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires look individual, each with its own posture, but they are deeply connected. They share origin, they share material, they share weather, they share erosion. Even their separateness was made by a shared process of cracking and removal. The landscape shows individuality without isolation, and that can feel comforting in a way that does not need to be explained too directly. The dark now is full enough that the smaller colors have gone. The world is shape, scent, texture, and temperature. Your eyes rest on silhouettes. Your skin reads the air. Your ears find small distances in soft sounds. The spires have become presences more than objects, and in that state, their strangeness turns almost tender. They are no longer asking to be studied. They are simply keeping company with the night. And as the night settles fully into the corridors, the cooled volcanic stone carries us onward, deeper into the quiet architecture of ash, where every pale tower around us has been made by loss, held by balance, and softened by the long patience of weather. The long patience of weather is easier to feel at night, when the color has retreated and the forms no longer compete for attention. You sense the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires by their nearness, by the way they narrow the air, by the mineral coolness that gathers where walls rise close to the trail. Their strangeness becomes less visual now and more bodily, as if the mountain were teaching through temperature, silence, and the faint dry scent of stone. We move through a passage where the ground is uneven but calm beneath your feet. Small fragments shift softly, then settle. A narrow crack runs upward through a nearby wall and disappears into shadow, and you can imagine rain entering that crack long after we have gone, following the same dark line again and again. The spire is standing, but the path of its future is already drawn inside it, a quiet seam where weather will keep working. This is one of the most peaceful truths in Chiricahua. The landscape has no single fixed moment. What we see is a pause within a much longer motion, and the pause is beautiful because it is so finely balanced. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are not young, and they are not finished. They are held between their volcanic beginning and their eventual return to slope, soil, wash, and dust, while trees and shadows keep them company. You may notice how the darkness makes every vertical shape feel taller. A column that seemed moderate in daylight now rises into a sky that gives it no clear edge. A cluster of towers becomes a single dark mass, then separates again when the path turns and a strip of starlit air appears between them. The eye rests, adjusts, and rests again. Nothing arrives suddenly. The spires reveal themselves slowly, the way thoughts soften before sleep. In this quiet, the word rhyolite feels almost like a whispered key. It names a rock rich in silica, often pale, often associated with thick lava, explosive ash and volcanic material that can cool into glassy or finely crystalline textures. Here, that chemistry made ash that welded into tuff, and the tuff weathered into spires. The science is clear, but it still feels dreamlike, because the result is a forest of stone made from particles once light enough to ride hot air. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange because their material remembers both lightness and weight. Ash is light when it falls. Welded tuff is firm underfoot. A spire is heavy enough to stand through ages, yet its origin was drifting, fragmental, airborne. That contrast stays inside the landscape. The towers stand with a kind of airy heaviness, massive in form, yet full of the memory of falling particles, settled heat, and a cloud becoming ground. You can let that image move slowly through the mind. A volcanic cloud cools into stone. Stone cracks into columns. Columns weather into towers. Towers shelter trees. Trees drop leaves. Leaves become soil. Soil holds roots. Roots touch cracks. Cracks widen by the smallest measures. The chain is so gentle when told slowly that it feels almost like a lullaby of geology, each step resting inside the next without hurry. As we continue, The trail passes near a wall that is marked by shallow vertical grooves. In daylight, they might appear as delicate lines, but now they are darker bands, barely visible unless the sky catches them from the side. Those grooves were made by water, even in this dry mountain country, because rare and seasonal water can be powerful when it returns to the same path. It does not need to rush, it only needs to remember. The remembering belongs to the rock as much as the water. Once a small groove exists, later water is guided into it. Once a fracture opens, moisture enters more readily. Once softer material loosens, the surface offers another place for weathering to begin. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are full of these inherited pathways, little decisions made by earlier seasons that continue to guide the present. A landscape can have habits, if we use the word gently. You can feel your own walking become habitual too. Step, breath, pause, turn. A cool wall, an open gap, a dark tree, a pale edge of sky. The rhythm does not press forward. It circles and deepens. This is how a long night walk among spires can become restful, because the body starts trusting the pattern. Even strangeness becomes familiar when it repeats softly enough. The ecological life of the spires also follows these inherited pathways. A seed held in a crevice may find more moisture than one lying on open stone. A lichen growing on a shaded face may survive where a hotter surface stays too dry. A shrub at the base of a wall may benefit from runoff directed by grooves above. The spires do not choose these arrangements, but they create them, and life answers in small, patient ways. At night, most of that life is quiet. Leaves hold their shape, needles darken. Roots continue below the surface in a slow, hidden intimacy with soil and fractured stone. The smell of plant matter is soft, not lush, but steady. Dry country often has this restrained fragrance, as if every scent has traveled through sun and mineral air before reaching you. It suits the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires, because they too are restrained, revealing much through very little movement. A pale cliff face appears to the right, broad enough to show where the spires once belonged to a larger body of rock. Not every surface has separated into a column. Some remain as walls, fins and ridges, still connected to the underlying mass. This is important, because the strange towers are only one expression of the same volcanic sheet. The landscape includes standing remnants, half-separated blocks, weathered cliffs, talus slopes, and fine soil, all parts of one quiet continuum. You may imagine the original deposit as a wide blanket draped over older landforms. It cooled, hardened, and was later carved open by weather and drainage. Where erosion cut deeper, towers stood apart. Where erosion worked less fully, walls remained. Where blocks loosened, slopes formed below. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are therefore not isolated curiosities, but visible peaks of a process that continues across the whole mountain. This makes their strangeness feel more complete. They are not exceptions to the landscape. They are the landscape speaking clearly. In them, the hidden tendencies of the rock become visible. The fractures show themselves as gaps. The resistant zones show themselves as caps and columns. The softer zones show themselves as hollows and narrowing bases. The place has been translated by weather from a solid mass into an open language of forms. We slow beside a cluster of columns that rise close together, separated by dark vertical spaces. They resemble a group gathered in silence, though they are only remnants of once connected stone. The spaces between them feel cool, and the air has the faint mineral dryness of shaded rock. If a breeze enters, it does so carefully, passing between the columns and then fading among the shrubs below. Everything here seems to move by permission. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires often create this sense of permission because their scale is large enough to surround you, but not so large that they feel remote. You can look up at them, walk around them, pass between them, and notice the small plants at their bases. They hold both grandeur and closeness. They let the mind expand into deep time, then return to a lichen patch, a root, a fallen leaf, a pebble beside the trail. That return is part of the sleepfulness. Vastness alone can wake the mind if it feels too wide. Detail alone can busy the mind if it asks too much. Chiricahua offers both in alternation, A ridge of spires under the night sky gives you vastness. A cool crack beside your hand gives you detail. Together they create a slow inward and outward movement, like breathing, like the tide of attention before sleep. And as we follow that breathing deeper through the formations, we begin to notice how the spires soften distance itself, making the near feel ancient and the ancient feel near. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires do not sit far away on a horizon only. They stand beside the trail, close enough for their oldness to enter the present moment. This closeness changes how time feels. A textbook might tell you about volcanic ash flows and caldera eruptions, and the mind understands from a distance. But a cool wall beside your shoulder gives the knowledge weight and texture. The old eruption becomes the surface that holds shadow. The cooling cracks become the dark seams above you. The welded ash becomes the grit under your shoe. Deep time is no longer abstract. It is surrounding. You can stand near one of the spires and imagine its entire life without needing to picture every detail. It began in heat, settled from ash, welded under its own mass, cooled and fractured, lay exposed to weather, separated from nearby rock, and now rises into night air while roots, lichens and dust gather around it. That story is long enough to humble the mind, but gentle enough to let the body rest. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange because they make the past physical without making it heavy. The past here does not press down. It stands quietly. It offers shade. It gathers moonlight. It holds a trail in its curves. You can move beside it without feeling crowded by it. The stone has waited through so much time that a single evening feels welcomed, absorbed, and made peaceful. The night air has a faint crispness now. It touches the skin lightly, especially in the open places between walls. In the sheltered places, the air is stiller and carries a little of the day's stored warmth. These small changes are easy to miss when the mind is busy, but as you slow down, they become part of the landscape's voice. The spires speak through temperature as surely as they speak through form. Thermal expansion and contraction also play their role in weathering. During the day, rock surfaces warm. At night, they cool. Different minerals and different parts of the rock respond in subtly different ways, creating stresses over long periods. In a climate with strong sun, cool nights and occasional moisture, these repeated changes can help loosen grains and open tiny weaknesses. Again, the process is quiet. It is a daily rhythm, extended into ages. There is something soothing in processes that repeat without urgency. Sun warms stone. Night cools it. Rain darkens it. Dryness lightens it. Wind clears loose dust. Plants shade its base. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are shaped by these cycles, and as we listen to them in imagination, our own cycles feel less separate. Breath, rest, waking, sleeping, returning. The mountain's rhythms are larger, but they are not foreign. A narrow side passage opens between two dark masses of rock. We do not need to enter it fully to feel its pull. It holds cooler air, deeper shadow, and the faint smell of leaves gathered where wind cannot easily clear them. Such passages form where weathering followed close-set fractures, removing material between stronger sections. In daylight, they might invite careful exploration. At night, they invite only a calm glance, a recognition of depth, then a gentle moving on. Moving on is important in a sleep journey. We do not need to stop at every detail. We can let details pass, like slow lights underwater. A seam, a ledge, a rounded cap, a tilted block, a dark oak, a pale wall. Each appears, offers its small truth, and recedes. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires do not need to be possessed by attention. They are kinder when allowed to drift through it. Still, some shapes linger in the mind. A balanced rock against the sky, a pair of columns almost touching near the top, a wall with a window cut by erosion, a pillar narrowed at its base, broad above, calm in its unlikely stance. These forms feel strange because they seem momentary, yet they can persist for spans far longer than our own. They are temporary, but their temporariness has a geologic patience. The balanced forms especially invite that feeling. They are not balanced by magic, but by the relationship between resistance and erosion. A harder upper block may shield lower material. Surrounding rock wears away. The shape becomes perched, poised, and quietly improbable. Eventually, weather will change the balance. But for now, it remains. The phrase "for now" becomes very soft here, because in Chiricahua, "for now" can hold generations of silence. You can let that softness settle into your shoulders. Nothing in this walk demands a quick answer. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange enough to hold curiosity, but calm enough to release effort. We understand a little, then let the rest remain mysterious. The mind does not need to close the question, it can rest inside it, the way a shadow rests inside a crack. As we continue, the trail turns toward a slightly wider opening, where the spires stand farther apart and the sky enters more generously. The dark blue above has deepened, and the first stars seem small and cool. The stone towers frame them without reaching for them. In this open place, the mountain feels both high and sheltered, a sky island under night, with volcanic forms rising like old pale thoughts from the earth. And as the sky opens above the stone, the story of the surrounding desert becomes present again, because the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange partly because they rise from a land of contrasts. Around these mountains lie drier basins and open country, while here the elevation, rock and shade gather a different world. From far away, the Chiricahua Mountains rise as a distinct mass from the surrounding region. They catch weather. They create cooler slopes. They hold woodland and canyons, spires and ridges, ravines and high quiet places. This is why the term Sky Island feels so apt. The mountain is not surrounded by water, yet it rises from a lower sea of heat and dryness, carrying its own climates upward. The spires belong to that uplifted complexity. They are made of ancient volcanic material, but they are experienced as part of a living highland. You feel desert and woodland at once. Dry dust underfoot, oak leaves near the trail, juniper scent in the air, pale volcanic towers beside dark plant silhouettes, open sky above shaded passages. The contrasts do not clash. They blend slowly, like colors fading together at dusk. This blending is one reason the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires feel so different from ordinary cliffs. They are not just vertical rock faces. They are interwoven with paths, plants, microclimates, and changing views. A cliff may stand apart from you, but these spires often let you pass among them. You don't only observe the formations. You move inside the spaces they have made, and the landscape becomes a quiet conversation with your senses. The sense of touch becomes especially important as night deepens. Even without direct contact, you feel the ground's firmness, the coolness of air near shaded stone, the dryness of the trail, and the subtle warmth where rock has held sunlight. The body knows where the walls are. The body understands enclosure. It reads the spires through skin and balance, through the way footsteps shorten in narrow places and lengthen when the path opens. The science of this place is not separate from that bodily knowledge. Geology determines slope, texture, and drainage. Drainage influences plants. Plants influence soil. Soil influences footing and scent. Stone walls influence wind and temperature. Each fact becomes a sensation. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are a reminder that landscapes are not ideas first. They are places felt by bodies and then understood by minds. In the widened opening, a low breeze crosses the trail. It carries a dry, resinous fragrance from juniper or pine, mixed with the faint earthiness of cooling soil. The sound of leaves is slight, more like a brushing than a rustle. A dark column stands to one side, and beyond it, another tower is half hidden by branches. The arrangement feels accidental and complete. The mountain has no need to improve it. This completeness without design is central to the strangeness. Human-made spaces often show purpose immediately. Natural spaces show relationship instead. The spire stands because that part of the rock resisted. The tree grows because that pocket offered enough soil. The trail bends because the wall does not move. The breeze quiets because the passage narrows. Everything fits, not because it was planned, but because everything has adjusted to everything else over time. There is deep rest in adjustment. The land is not forcing itself into a final form. It is responding. Weather responds to stone. Stone responds to weather. Life responds to both. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are a visible record of response, and perhaps that is why they feel so alive without moving. They have been answered by the world for millions of years. As we walk on, A series of smaller pinnacles appears along a slope. They are less towering than the great columns, but they have the same pale texture, the same softened tops, the same narrow seams. Smaller forms matter here. They show that the processes shaping the largest spires also operate at modest scales. Weather does not reserve its patience for monuments. It works on every exposed edge, every loose grain, every small fracture. You may find this soothing too. The landscape's beauty is not only in its famous shapes, it is in the minor ones. The half-formed pillar, the rounded stone beside the path, the little pocket of soil under an overhang, the shallow groove where rain has passed. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires teach attention gradually, bringing the eye from grandeur to quiet detail and back again. Sleep often arrives by that same gradual narrowing of attention. A small ledge catches a faint remnant of sky glow. It looks almost silver. Below it, the wall is dark, and at its base, shrubs make a low, uneven shadow. The ledge may owe its shape to a harder layer or more resistant zone in the welded tuff, while the material below has weathered back. The explanation is simple, but the visual effect is tender, a pale shelf of stone holding the last light for a little longer than the ground. The same principle repeats in many forms. Harder parts protect, softer parts retreat. Resistant caps remain while base is narrow. Dense zones stand while porous zones crumble. Weather follows weakness, but it also reveals strength. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are therefore not only records of erosion, they are records of endurance, showing where the rock could hold itself together after surrounding material had gone. Endurance here is not rigid, it is flexible across time. A spire endures by adapting to weather, by shedding unstable pieces, by narrowing, rounding and opening. It does not remain exactly as it was. It remains by becoming another version of itself. This is a quiet, generous kind of endurance, and it feels especially fitting in the deepening night, when all outlines soften and even stone seems willing to release its daylight certainty. And as the outlines soften, we enter a more inward part of the journey, where the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires become less a landscape to look at and more a landscape to drift through in thought. The trail is still here, the stones are still here, but the mind begins to move at the speed of weather. At the speed of weather, a day is only a touch of warmth and coolness. A season is a passing color, a little water, a little dryness, a little growth. A century is enough for a crack to widen, perhaps, or a surface to round a little more, or a lichen patch to spread beyond where it once began. Millions of years are not a number now, but a slow exhale through stone. The mountain breathes in scales too large to hear. You can imagine sitting quietly near one of the spires before dawn. The rock would be cool. The air would be still. Slowly, light would find the highest edges first, then slide down the walls. Birds might begin softly in the trees. Shadows would shorten. Warmth would return to the surface. Nothing would happen suddenly, yet the whole landscape would change. This daily renewal repeats over and over, a small rhythm riding on deep time. Tonight, though, we stay with the nightward movement. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are losing detail and gaining presence. They seem older in darkness, not because darkness adds age, but because it removes distraction. Without every color and texture, their forms become simpler, more archetypal, almost like the idea of stone towers held in the mind before words. The strangeness becomes quieter, and the quiet becomes deeper. The path descends gently through a section where fallen rock lines the side. These fragments are reminders that even the most patient formations are not motionless forever. A block may detach along a joint after many seasons of weakening. It may fall, rest, and begin its own slower weathering on the ground. The event itself might be brief, but the preparation is long, and the aftermath is longer still. Chiricahua contains both the moment and the ages around it. There is no need to imagine the fall with force tonight. Imagine instead the resting afterward, a block lying among leaves, dust settling, rain finding new roots around it, a lizard in warmer hours using its surface. a seed catching in the gap behind it. Soil gathering. The fallen stone becomes part of the living floor. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires continue their descent into the ecosystem, not as loss, but as participation. This participation is everywhere. The spires catch light for plants. They catch water for roots. They catch wind-blown dust and leaves. They create niches for life. In return, plants shade their bases, hold soil, introduce organic acids, and guide moisture in small ways. The relationship is slow and modest, but real. A rock garden is not only stone plus plants, it is the exchange between them, repeated until the boundary becomes soft. At times, the boundary is physically soft. Weathered tuff can crumble into grains that feel almost like coarse powder. The surface may look firm from a distance, then reveal its granular nature up close. This matters because the original ash was fragmental, and even after welding, some parts remain more susceptible to granular disintegration. The rock can stand as a spire and still remember how to become particles again. That memory is part of its strange tenderness. You might picture a pale grain loosening from a wall and falling into shadow. It makes no sound you can hear. It rests near other grains. Later, water moves it slightly. Later still, it may join soil, or travel down a wash, or settle somewhere under grass. The journey is tiny and enormous at once, because the same kind of movement, multiplied beyond counting, shapes whole mountains. The small is never separate from the vast. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires show this beautifully. Their largest forms can be understood through countless small changes. A tower is the sum of weathering that happened grain by grain and block by block. A corridor is the sum of material removed along fractures. A balanced rock is the sum of protection and undercutting, persistence and retreat. The strange grandeur is made from small, patient events, and that thought can settle the mind like soft dust. As we keep moving, a darker stand of trees appears beside the trail. Their branches make uneven patterns against the sky, and some lean close to the spires as if the living wood were listening to the stone. In daylight, you might identify oak, juniper, or pine by leaf, bark, and shape. Now you feel them as presence and scent. Their roots are below, threading through soil that the volcanic rock helped create. The root systems do not need deep, rich soil everywhere. Many plants in this region are adapted to thin, rocky ground and seasonal moisture. Roots search cracks, follow pockets, and hold fast where they can. The spires and broken rocks create enough variation for a surprising richness of life. This is another answer to why the landscape feels so strange. It looks severe at first, but it is full of quiet opportunities. Opportunity is not abundance in the lush sense. It is a crevice with shade, a ledge with soil, a runoff line after rain, a cooler north-facing wall, a sheltered base where leaves collect. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires make many such small possibilities, and life responds with forms suited to patience. Tough leaves, resinous needles, deep roots, slow growth, careful flowering after moisture. The ecosystem speaks the same language as the rock. The night has settled enough that time feels loose. We may have been walking for minutes or hours. The spires make ordinary time less certain because each turn resembles the last, yet differs slightly. This repetition is not confusing in a harsh way. It is soothing. The mind no longer needs to measure progress. It can simply drift from one formation to another, as if following a current through a quiet sea of stone. And as the path carries us through this stone sea, the ancient volcanic source remains below every sensation, like a low note held beneath the melody. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange because their calm present is built from an origin that was anything but calm, yet the land has turned that origin into stillness. The eruption that produced the ash flow tuff was part of a much larger volcanic story in the region. Magma rose, gases expanded, ash and pumice moved outward, and deposits settled over the older terrain. Over time, the volcanic system quieted, the deposits cooled, and the surface began its long transformation. Tonight, we meet the aftermath after millions of years of softening. We do not stand in the event. We stand in its echo. An echo can be gentler than its source. The spires are echoes of heat, but they hold cool shadow. They are echoes of ash clouds, but they stand in clear air. They are echoes of geologic upheaval, but they support lichens, shrubs, and trees. This transformation is not contradiction, it is time doing what time does, changing the meaning of materials without erasing their origin. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are old fire translated into rest. You can imagine the translation as a gradual cooling of language. First, the earth spoke in heat, then in welded stone, then in fractures, then in rain grooves, then in soil pockets, then in leaves and shade. Now it speaks in nighttime silence, with spires standing along the trail like sentences worn smooth by long use. We listen without needing every word. The tone is enough. The tone of this place is patient, dry, spacious, and enclosed all at once. That combination is rare. A desert can be spacious, a canyon can be enclosed, a forest can be shaded, a volcanic field can be stark, but here these qualities overlap. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires rise within woodland, above desert, from volcanic ash into mountain air. Their strangeness comes from the layering of many landscape identities in one quiet place. Layering also appears within the rock itself. The ash flow deposit may show variations from different pulses, cooling zones, or degrees of welding. Some parts weather into columns more readily, others form cliffs or slopes. Mineral alteration can change color and resistance. Iron staining can warm a surface with rust tones. Silica-rich material can remain pale and resistant. These subtle differences are amplified by erosion until the whole mountain becomes textured with form. In the dark, color differences are nearly gone, but you can remember them. Cream and gray, faint pink, rust-red stains, soft lavender shadows, dark lichen, pale lichen, silver-green lichen. The visual palette is quiet even in daylight, and at night it becomes quieter still. This is not a landscape of bright insistence. It is a landscape of muted tones, appropriate for sleep, appropriate for slow attention, appropriate for stone that has waited a very long time. The trail narrows again. On one side, the wall rises close enough that you feel its coolness. On the other, a lower slope falls away into trees. The space between is like a ledge through memory. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires stand above and below, some hidden, some visible only as darker shapes. You are held by the mountain without being confined by it. The sky remains above, open and calm. This balance between shelter and openness may be one of the deepest comforts here. Complete exposure can feel restless. Complete enclosure can feel too close. But Chiricahua offers alternating measures of both. Stone gathers around you, then lets you see the sky. A corridor narrows, then a slope opens. A wall blocks the wind, then a gap lets the air move through. The body reads this as a kind of care, though it is only the kindness of form. The spires do not intend comfort, yet comfort can arise from them. Natural landscapes often soothe without intention. A stream does not sing for us, but we rest beside it. A forest does not lower its branches for us, but shade feels generous. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires do not stand for us, but their quiet presence can help the mind release its sharpness. The absence of intention may even deepen the peace. As we move onward, a small open basin appears between clusters of towers. In daylight, this might be a place where grasses catch sun and shrubs root in accumulated soil. Now it is a soft, dark hollow, ringed by paler vertical shapes. The ground underfoot feels finer here, perhaps where material has collected from nearby walls. Such basins show how erosion creates not only high forms but also resting places, little pockets where sediment, seeds, and shade gather. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange because the spaces they create are as varied as the stones themselves. Some spaces are narrow and cool, some are open and bright, some are dry shelves, some are shaded pockets, some are corridors for wind, some are catchments for leaves. The ecosystem depends on these differences, and the walker feels them as changing mood. Each space is a small room in the larger house of the mountain. Again, the word house is only a metaphor, and a gentle one. No one built these rooms. The rooms appeared as the rock body opened. Weather removed enough material for passage, and gravity cleared it away. Plants softened the edges. Light entered from above. Now we move through them as guests of process, not guests of design. This distinction matters because it keeps the wonder grounded in the earth. Grounded wonder is the voice of this place. It does not ask for spectacle, it asks for patience. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are not strange in a way that needs to be solved quickly. They are strange in the way an ancient tree is strange, or a fossil shell in limestone, or stars reflected in a still pool. They remind you that the world has depths of making beneath its quiet surfaces, and those depths can be peaceful. A faint slope carries us lower, and the rock walls recede for a moment. Above, the sky is clear enough to imagine more stars appearing, one by one, without hurry. The air has lost most of the day's warmth. Your breath feels slower in the coolness. Somewhere, far off, a night sound may begin and fade, but the dominant feeling remains the same. A broad hush held by stone, trees, and the unseen folds of the mountain. And as the path lowers, we come closer to the washes that help carry the weathered material away, because every spire has a relationship with the slopes and channels below it. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires stand high, but their grains are always being invited downward. In dry mountain country, washes can remain quiet for long periods, then briefly carry water after rain. Between those moments, they hold sand, gravel, leaves, and stones in pale beds that remember movement. Material weathered from the spires finds its way into these channels. Some of it travels only a little. Some may move farther during stronger flows. The wash is another slow chapter in the life of volcanic ash. You might imagine one after summer rain, not as a rushing spectacle, but as a temporary darkening of the land. Water gathers from slopes, slips through gullies, and enters the wash carrying fine sediment. Pebbles shift, sand smooths. Organic matter moves with it. Then the water sinks, evaporates, or flows on, leaving new arrangements behind. The channel becomes quiet again, but it is not the same quiet as before. It has been rewritten slightly. The spires above feed that rewriting. Each weathered grain has a path, though the path may be interrupted many times. From wall to ledge, from ledge to base, from base to slope, from slope to wash, from wash to lower ground. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are therefore part of a drainage story, not only a skyline story. Their beauty rises upward, but their material moves downward through the landscape. This downward invitation is softened by plants. Roots hold some material in place. Leaf litter slows runoff. Fallen branches catch sediment. Grasses bind soil in small patches. The ecosystem moderates the movement, creating pauses where otherwise the grains might travel faster. In return, the weathered rock provides mineral ground for life. The relationship is reciprocal, quiet, and ongoing, like many old relationships in landscapes. As we approach the idea of these washes, even if we do not stand in one fully, the sound of imagined water becomes very soft, not a loud stream, but a brief after-rain trickle slipping over stone. A faint ticking of drops from leaves, a dark shine on pale tuff, then the return of dryness, the smell of damp dust fading into mineral coolness. In Chiricahua, water is often memorable because it is not always present. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are shaped by that intermittence. Constant rivers carve differently than occasional rain, frost, and runoff. Here, the land holds the marks of episodic moisture and long dryness, of intense sun and cool nights, of weathering that works in pulses separated by quiet. This gives the forms their peculiar sharp, soft quality, with bold vertical separations and rounded, weathered surfaces. The land is both cut and soothed. That phrase can rest in the mind. Cut and soothed, opened and softened, divided and rounded. The spires are made by these paired actions. Fractures divide, weather rounds, water opens, dryness preserves, gravity removes, plants shelter. The landscape keeps balancing opposites until the result feels calm rather than conflicted. This is one reason the strangeness does not disturb sleep. It has already been reconciled by time. We continue along the path, and a group of spires appears like a dark procession along the ridge above. Their tops are uneven against the sky, some flat, some pointed, some rounded. During the day, each would show individual texture and color, but now they share one shadowed outline. This shared outline reminds you of their common origin. Many forms, one material. Many towers, one volcanic breath. Many quiet presences, one mountain. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires invite this kind of thinking, moving between the one and the many. One deposit became many formations. Many fractures opened one landscape. One process repeated in many places. Many small grains made one tower, and one tower slowly gives itself back to many grains. The mind can follow this gently, like a pendulum slowing down, from unity to variety, and back again. In the silence, even the scientific terms feel softer. Caldera, tuff, rhyolite, welding, jointing, weathering, erosion, microclimate. Each word names a part of the story, but none can hold the whole alone. The whole is what you feel as you walk among the spires, with cool air touching your face, stone rising beside you, and the scent of dry woodland resting in the dark. Knowledge becomes atmosphere. This is perhaps the best way to understand why the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are so strange. They blur categories without losing clarity. They are volcanic, but restful. Desert adjacent, but wooded. Massive, but delicate. Ancient, but present. Eroded, but standing. Separate, but connected. Scientific, but dreamlike. The mind cannot flatten them into one simple description, so it slows down, and in slowing, it begins to sleep. As we move deeper into that slowing, the trail becomes less a route and more a thread through the quiet. The spires stand along it like beads of old stone, each shaped by heat, cooling, fracture, and weather. We do not count them. We let them pass. A high wall on the left, a rounded tower ahead, a shadowed cleft, a fallen block, a tree rooted where a little soil has gathered. The sequence is enough. The ground underfoot has its own calm irregularity. It is not polished flat. It asks for gentle attention, but not tension. Fine dust softens some steps, while stone gives firmness to others. This alternating contact keeps the body present in a quiet way. You are not floating away entirely. You are grounded by the same volcanic material that made the spires, and that grounding gives the drifting mind a place to rest. Grounding matters in a sleep landscape. Too much abstraction can leave the listener unheld. Chiricahua holds us with details. The scratch of gravel, the cool wall, the dry scent of oak leaves, the pale shapes rising into night, the knowledge that ash became stone, the knowledge that stone became shelter, the knowledge that shelter became a place where plants and quiet could gather. Each detail is a small handrail in the dark, and as we follow those handrails farther, the mountain's silence begins to feel less empty and more inhabited by slow processes. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are silent only in the human sense. In geologic time, they are full of subtle activity. Minerals alter, surfaces oxidize, grains loosen, cracks respond to temperature and moisture, lichens release faint acids, roots thicken, soil forms, water occasionally moves through, wind carries dust, gravity waits for weakness. These processes are not loud enough for ordinary hearing, but they are the true voice of the landscape. The spires are not mute. They are speaking too slowly for the ear. You can imagine listening with another kind of hearing, one made for centuries. In that hearing, a widening crack would have a tone. A falling grain would be a note. A rainstorm would be a brief phrase. A lichen patch spreading would be a low, sustained hum. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires would not be silent then, but deeply musical. Their song stretched so wide that we experience it as peace. This is not a fantasy that replaces science. It is a way of feeling what the science implies. Processes occur continuously, but slowly. The land changes, but subtly. Time passes, but not in the hurried way we usually measure it. When we bring our attention near that scale, the nervous mind can unclench a little. It does not have to keep pace with urgency. It can keep pace with weathered stone. The air grows cooler again as we pass into a lower shadowed place. You feel it near the wrists and face, a gentle thinning of warmth. The smell is darker here, with more leaf litter and less sun-baked dust. A wall rises on the right, and its base is hidden by shrubs. Somewhere above, A cap of harder rock may be protecting the column beneath, allowing the formation to hold its strange shape a little longer. A little longer is often the measure of landscapes. Not forever, not never, just longer. The harder cap lasts a little longer than the softer base. The shaded soil holds moisture a little longer than open ground. The lichen survives a little longer where sunlight is less harsh. The spire stands a little longer where fractures have not fully widened. These little longers accumulate into the visible world. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are made of accumulated little longers. Their resistant parts lasted while surrounding parts retreated. Their protected zones held while exposed ones wore away. Their shaded pockets preserved moisture while open slopes dried. Their forms persist because countless small conditions favored persistence for a time. This makes the landscape feel less impossible and more intimate. Its strangeness is built from small mercies of circumstance. We can rest with that. A small mercy of shade, a small mercy of stone, a small mercy of water paused in a crack after rain, a small mercy of soil caught behind a root. The land does not intend mercy, but the feeling can still arise in us. The body recognizes shelter where it finds it. The mind recognizes patience where it sees it. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires offer both, without saying anything at all. The path begins to curve again, and with the curve, the view shifts from close stone to a wider stand of silhouettes. For a moment, the spires ahead resemble a distant grove, though they are rock, not trees. This resemblance is part of their famous oddness. They occupy the visual role of a forest while remaining mineral. They make vertical repetition the way trunks do, but their surfaces are pale, rough, and anciently volcanic. A stone forest is a tempting phrase, and it fits if used gently. Like trees, the spires stand in groups, create shade, and shape movement between them. Unlike trees, they do not grow upward from living tissue, and their height comes from surrounding material wearing away. The comparison is beautiful because it is imperfect. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are forest-like and not forest-like, familiar and unfamiliar, which is exactly why they linger in the imagination. You can feel that lingering now. Even when a spire passes behind us, its shape remains inwardly visible for a while. A rounded cap, a narrow base, a vertical seam, a pale surface marked by weather. The next formation resembles it but differs. The mind layers them together, and soon the whole landscape becomes one long image, softly repeating, softly changing. This is a good image to carry towards sleep. As we drift onward, the geology beneath the image remains steady. Silica-rich volcanic ash, hot deposition, welding, cooling fractures, differential erosion, arid and semi-arid weathering, plant-assisted soil formation, microclimates created by stone. These are the threads. The woven cloth is the place itself, and tonight the cloth lies cool and dark over the mountain, patterned with spires. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires are strange because the woven result feels more delicate than the processes that began it. A great eruption, an ash flow sheet, a caldera-scale event, and millions of years of erosion have produced corridors where a person can walk quietly at dusk and smell dry leaves. Immense causes have made intimate spaces. The scale has folded down around us, and we are moving inside the fold. That folding down is another comfort. Vast geology does not stay vast at every moment. Sometimes it becomes a pebble in the trail. Sometimes it becomes a shaded root pocket, a pale ledge, or a cool hollow where night gathers early. The enormous and the small meet constantly here. You do not have to choose which to notice. The landscape offers both, again and again. The air is almost still now. The trail seems to hold the day's last memory in its dust, while the walls hold the night's first coolness in their shadowed seams. The spires around us are no longer separate from the darkness. They are part of it, giving it shape. The darkness is not empty, and it is not threatening. It is simply the evening resting among old volcanic towers, and we are resting our attention there too. And as we continue, the old towers guide us toward an even quieter understanding, one that belongs not only to how the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires formed, but to why they feel peaceful despite their impossible shapes. They are peaceful because every part of them has been slowed by time. The eruption is over, the ash has cooled, the rock has hardened, the cracks have opened, the weathering has softened, the plants have settled, the trail has found its way. Nothing in the present moment needs to rush. Even the processes still at work proceed at a pace that feels beneath the threshold of disturbance. The spires make visible a world after urgency, a world where the forces that made it have become quiet. This does not mean the landscape is asleep in any literal sense. It is active, changing, breathing with temperature, moisture, and life. But its activity is low and deep. It does not break the night open. It underlies it. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires show us that activity can be calm, that change can be soft, that strangeness can be a doorway into rest rather than a reason to tense. You can let that idea move through your breathing. Change can be soft. Stone can be patient. Darkness can be kind. A strange landscape can become familiar when you walk with it slowly enough. The spires stand around us, and their stillness is not absence but duration. They have stayed long enough for weather to write on them, for trees to gather near them, for silence to deepen between them. A final pale edge of sky lingers above one ridge, though the path itself is dark. The spires there form a jagged but softened line, a crown of volcanic remnants against the evening. The word jagged might sound sharp, but here even jaggedness has been worn by age. The edges are irregular, not harsh. The silhouette feels like a memory of mountains inside mountains, the uppermost expression of ash that once lay broad and hot across the land. We keep walking beneath that line, and the closeness of the spires returns. A passage narrows, then bends. The walls rise in shadow. The air cools along the ground. The smell of stone and leaves comes forward again. You may feel as if the landscape is folding around you in a protective way, although it is simply the natural arrangement of rock. The feeling is enough. We accept it without asking too much. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires have this gift of accepting interpretation without needing it. They can be studied scientifically, admired visually, wandered through quietly, or simply felt as presence. None of these ways cancels the others. Tonight, we allow them to overlap. We understand a little science. We notice a little texture. We feel a little peace. The spires remain larger than all of it, and that largeness is gentle. And as we pass deeper into the dark corridors of cooled ash, the mountain continues to hold us in its slow arrangement of stone and shadow, while the strange pale towers stand around us, with their old volcanic patience, waiting through the night as they have waited through countless nights before. The night has settled fully among the Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires, and the old volcanic stone no longer needs color to be known. It stands by shape, by coolness, by the quiet pressure of presence beside the trail. The towers rise from shadow and return to shadow, their pale faces hidden now, their seams and ledges resting in the dark. You can let your walking slow until it becomes almost still. Around you, the dry scent of leaves and mineral dust lingers close to the ground. The air is cool against your face. The spires hold the last warmth of the day somewhere deep within their stone, releasing it too slowly to notice, like an old memory leaving without sound. There is no need to understand more tonight. The ash has become rock. The rock has become towers. The towers have become shelter for shade, roots, silence, and the soft patience of weather. Everything here continues at its own unhurried pace, beyond the reach of urgency, beneath the wide dark sky. Now the path seems to disappear into the same quiet that holds the cliffs and columns. The Chiricahua Rhyolite Spires stand around you like a still forest made from ancient fire, no longer strange in a restless way, but strange in the way deep time is strange, gentle, wordless, and almost asleep. You can rest here for a while, where the mountain has cooled, where the dust has settled, where the stone keeps its long watch without effort. The night moves softly through the narrow spaces. The ground is steady beneath you, and now you are here, among the spires, where it is finally quiet.